Chichen Itza, a spectacular ancient Maya city shrouded in mystery and myths.
It's the greatest ancient city in the world.
It's a jungle metropolis with a hidden underworld and dark secrets. What happened to this lost civilization? How and why was this vast city built? And did the people living here practice human sacrifice? The only way to solve these mysteries is to go deep into the heart of the Mayan city, exploring its structures stone by stone will help us unearth the astonishing secrets at the heart of this ancient wonder.
A strange uneasiness spread across the research camp long before anyone spoke of it aloud. It lingered in the humid air above the lowland rainforest, clung to equipment cases, and settled in the quiet spaces between conversations. Deep below the canopy, where vines twisted into ancient stone and the breath of the past still pulsed like a heartbeat, scientists had recovered something they never expected to find. It was an unassuming piece of skeletal material, preserved far beyond probability, sealed in a collapsed ceremonial chamber that had not seen sunlight for more than a millennium. To the archaeologists, it was extraordinary. To the geneticists, it was a miracle. And by the time the first sequence results came back from the remote lab, it had become something else entirely. A discovery so unsettling, so fundamentally disruptive, that it would challenge the very foundations of what was believed about one of the most enigmatic civilizations in human history. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. The Maya had always been shrouded in a kind of reverent mystery. Their towering pyramids rose from the jungle as if grown from the earth itself. Their astronomers tracked celestial cycles with a precision unmatched in the pre-modern world. Their scribes constructed a writing system rich with mythic symbolism and cosmic geometry. Yet the question of their origins remained an academic puzzle, a conversation shaped by migration models, early settlements, and cultural evolution. Nothing suggested anything particularly radical. Nothing implied a secret lineage. Nothing hinted at a past darker and stranger than researchers were prepared to imagine. That was true until the sequencing began to resolve and the data started to show its first anomalies. No one expected the genetic profile to diverge so sharply from the patterns of early Mesoamerican populations. At first, the results were assumed to be contamination, a misfire, perhaps a degraded fragment amplified incorrectly. But repeated runs confirmed the same disquieting signatures. A set of markers appeared that did not fit any known migration wave into the region. They did not resemble the genetic structure of earlier Paleo-Indian groups, nor did they match northern or southern lineages theorized to have seeded the first population blooms across the Americas. Instead, they pointed to something else entirely, a branch so deeply separated that its divergence dated far earlier than any existing models allowed. The scientists had essentially stumbled upon evidence of a population that should not have existed where it was found, one whose genetic fingerprints were almost entirely absent from surrounding regions. It was as though an isolated group had appeared in the Maya heartland without leaving a trace of their journey. The implications were staggering. Either a previously unknown migration occurred in ways that defied geography and chronology, or the origins of early Maya, elites were tied to a lineage deliberately kept separate, shielded, or erased over time. Each possibility strained belief, yet the DNA spoke with an unsettling clarity. As more samples were sequenced, patterns emerged that suggested this enigmatic lineage was concentrated among individuals buried in ceremonial contexts, particularly those associated with rulership, divination, or astronomical knowledge. These were not ordinary members of Maya society. They were individuals connected to power, ritual, and the structuring of the cosmos. Their genetic isolation was so extreme that the research team began to suspect it was intentional. It was as if the early Maya had integrated with a group distinct in origin, but central to knowledge, governance, and the formation of the civilization's identity. Such a scenario contradicted every widely accepted narrative of Maya cultural development. evidence began to point toward the existence of an elite stratum whose origins were deliberately obscured in surviving texts and mythic histories, obscured not out of malice but out of necessity. The Maya were masters of symbolism and encoded knowledge. Their cosmology often blurred boundaries between realms, beings, and epochs. Within their stories lay hints of ancestors who came from distant places across primordial waters or descended from celestial entities carrying wisdom. Scholars had long interpreted these as metaphorical traditions crafted to legitimize authority. But the genetic findings now suggested there may have been a literal component woven into the symbolism, something grounded in an actual population movement lost in time. The most disturbing aspect of the discovery was the inexplicable absence of genetic continuity between this ancient lineage and later Maya populations. At some point, this group disappeared completely from the gene pool. Whether due to isolation, extinction, or deliberate removal, their lineage vanished without explanation. But their cultural influence remained. The architectural layout of early ceremonial centers showed a sudden shift that aligned with the presence of this lineage. The complexity of astronomical records, the development of the calendar, and the intricate mathematics appeared to crystallize during the era in which this genetic group was active. It was as though they brought with them a reservoir of knowledge that propelled Maya civilization forward in ways that could not be explained solely by local development. This raised more troubling questions. How had such a group arrived in the heart of the rainforest? Why had they remained genetically distinct even as they integrated culturally? And why had their biological legacy been erased so completely, leaving only their ideas embedded in stone and inscriptions? The team grew increasingly aware that the implications extended far beyond the confines of anthropology. They touched on human prehistory, long-held assumptions about migration, and the possibility that entire chapters of global population dynamics were missing from the archaeological record. Scholars debated whether this lineage represented a remnant of an ancient population displaced by environmental catastrophes, or whether they were the survivors of a civilization predating known American settlement patterns. As the investigation progressed, researchers detected surprising biochemical signatures in the remains, suggesting unusual rituals surrounding death and preservation. The combination of burial context, material offerings, and the biological distinctiveness of the individuals hinted at a form of ritualized separation between this group and the broader population. They may have been revered, feared, or perceived as intermediaries between worlds. Their isolation could have been cultural as much as genetic, maintained through marriage restrictions, ritual purity, or cosmological beliefs that required the guardians of esoteric knowledge to remain apart. Deciphering the emotional weight of the discovery was nearly as complex as interpreting the data itself. The Maya were not simply a civilization of architects, astronomers, and mathematicians. They were a people whose understanding of the universe infused all aspects of daily life. If their origins involved an encounter between distinct populations with vastly different histories, then the rise of Maya civilization may have stemmed from a deeply layered fusion of identities and stories. The ancient lineage uncovered in the DNA would have been both a source of wisdom and a source of tension. Integrating a mysterious group into an emerging society likely created both cultural enrichment and cultural strain, forging a narrative that mixed reverence with caution. There were signs that the early Maya elite deliberately encoded this origin story in symbolic language rather than explicit historical accounts. Stelae depicting ancestors emerging from caves, oceans, or celestial portals took on new meaning. Architectural alignments that mirrored distant star clusters seemed less like coincidence and more like echoes of a worldview inherited from a population with a distinct intellectual tradition. Even myths surrounding cyclical destruction and rebirth hinted at memories of displacement or catastrophic events carried by the ancient lineage into the Maya heartland. The discovery forced researchers to confront the possibility that early Maya civilization did not emerge solely through gradual local development, but through an encounter with a group carrying a heritage shaped by events far beyond the traditional archaeological landscape. The shadows of this lineage permeated the foundational layers of the civilization, subtly influencing its direction before disappearing without a trace. Whether this disappearance was the result of assimilation without biological continuity, disease, social upheaval, or purposeful erasure remained unclear. But the genetic silence surrounding them only heightened the intrigue. The implications for understanding human prehistory were enormous. If a lineage could vanish so completely while leaving such an indelible cultural mark, then the archaeological record might be filled with similar absences. History might be shaped as much by what vanished as by what survived. The Maya example could be a microcosm of a larger pattern in which civilizations carried within them the legacies of forgotten groups, lost migrations, and erased identities whose influence persisted long after their biological lineages faded from existence. Questions multiplied as the team considered the broader context. Could environmental transformations have displaced this lineage from its homeland, driving them into the rainforest where they merged with nascent Maya communities? Could they have been refugees fleeing a catastrophe, bringing with them knowledge of the stars, cycles, and mathematics essential to survival? Or were they guardians of traditions already ancient by the time they arrived in Mesoamerica, seeking a new home where their worldview could take root again? Each theory implied a deeper and more complex history of human movement than previously imagined. Even more unsettling were the hints that this lineage may have possessed specialized knowledge so valuable that the Maya integrated it rapidly into their socio-political systems. The sudden appearance of advanced astronomical records, the early standardization of ceremonial centers, and the consistent alignment of temples with solstices and equinoxes all hinted at intellectual input beyond the expected developmental timeline. While it would be inaccurate to attribute Maya achievements to an external group, it was equally difficult to ignore the possibility that the ancient lineage contributed a distinctive intellectual framework that accelerated the civilization's growth. The genetic evidence also prompted a reevaluation of long-standing assumptions about cultural exchange in ancient Mesoamerica. Researchers began examining whether artifacts or iconography from early Maya sites contained motifs that paralleled regions far outside their traditional sphere of interaction. Subtle stylistic anomalies in ceramics, symbolism in early murals, and unique construction techniques were reinterpreted under the lens of this new discovery. While none provided conclusive proof of a far-flung origin, they collectively suggested that researchers had overlooked clues in plain sight simply because they did not fit accepted narratives. Though the team was cautious not to overinterpret the data, they recognized that the discovery fundamentally challenged the linear models of cultural development often used to describe ancient civilizations. The Maya, long admired for their intellectual brilliance, now appeared even more complex. Their origins were not a simple story of isolated innovation, but a tapestry woven from diverse threads, some of which came from a lineage forgotten by time. The presence of this lineage, fleeting in the genetic record yet profound in cultural impact, introduced a dimension of mystery that deepened rather than diminished respect for Maya achievements. Over time, the research environment shifted from shock to determination. Scientists realized that the key to understanding the full story lay in expanding the search for genetic samples across other early sites, hoping to uncover more fragments of the lost lineage. Each new excavation became an opportunity to retrieve traces that might illuminate their past. But the rarity of the markers suggested that this group was always small in number, perhaps intentionally so. Their influence came from knowledge and cultural authority rather than demographic dominance. They were, in essence, a lineage whose significance lay not in population size, but in intellectual legacy. The idea that a small group could shape the trajectory of an entire civilization resonated deeply with researchers. Human history was filled with moments when individuals or communities carried knowledge across landscapes, sparking transformations that echoed for centuries. In this context, the ancient Maya lineage became emblematic of a broader phenomenon: the quiet power of forgotten peoples to influence the world through ideas that outlived their biological footprint. The discovery ultimately expanded the horizon of inquiry, prompting new explorations into how civilizations form, how knowledge travels, and how cultural memory preserves fragments of lost histories. The Maya had always been a civilization of depth and complexity, but now their story reached further back than anyone had imagined, stretching into a past where a mysterious lineage carried wisdom and trauma, migration and memory into the jungles of Mesoamerica. Their presence reshaped the timeline of human movement and forced a reevaluation of what it means for a civilization to emerge from the meeting of worlds. Even without tracing their full history, the implications remained profound. The DNA evidence provided a rare glimpse into the hidden mechanisms that drive cultural evolution. It suggested that the foundations of great civilizations might rest on the contributions of groups long vanished from the genetic map. It challenged the idea of linear progress and replaced it with a mosaic of interwoven stories, some visible, others buried beneath centuries of silence. In the humid stillness of the rainforest, where the echoes of ancient rituals still seemed to vibrate through stone, the scientists realized they had uncovered more than a genetic anomaly. They had revealed a secret chapter of Maya origins, one that blended mystery, intellect, and separation into a narrative far more intricate than previously known. The darkness implied by the discovery did not come from malevolence, but from obscurity, from the shadows cast by time over a lineage that shaped a civilization before vanishing into the depths of history. Their legacy endured not through bloodlines, but through the ideas, symbols, and structures that define the Maya world. The work was far from over, but the revelation had already transformed the field. The Maya were no longer simply descendants of known migration waves. They were the inheritors of a deeper, more enigmatic past, a civilization built in part on the wisdom of a forgotten people whose origins remained shrouded in the darkness of prehistory. The scientists had exposed a truth more complicated and extraordinary than they had imagined, one that would continue to shape their understanding of the ancient world for years to come. In the weeks following the revelation, the research team began to reassess not only what they had found, but how they had interpreted the physical landscape surrounding the discovery. The rainforest, dense and overwhelming, had always been a barrier to extensive archaeological mapping. Yet, with the weight of the new genetic evidence pressing upon their minds, the scientists realized the terrain itself might hold clues to the story of the enigmatic lineage. Remote sensing tools were deployed with renewed urgency. Infrared mapping, ground-penetrating radar, and LiDAR sweeps began revealing networks of ancient terraces, canals, and ceremonial pathways previously obscured by undergrowth. What emerged was a landscape far more engineered than anyone had suspected, suggesting a deliberate shaping of the environment that predated known Maya urban development. The sudden sophistication of these constructions hinted that the ancient lineage might have contributed to the earliest large-scale reshaping of the Maya lowlands. Terraces arranged in carefully calculated gradients, reservoirs sealed using a mineral compound not found in contemporary Mesoamerican architecture, and causeways aligned with astronomical events all pointed to an advanced understanding of engineering. While the Maya were already known for remarkable environmental adaptations, the chronology implied that foundational infrastructure appeared abruptly rather than gradually. This intensified the mystery surrounding the lineage's role. They seemed to possess architectural knowledge that did not resemble any tradition in neighboring regions. As more fieldwork uncovered artifacts near these engineered features, researchers noticed stylistic details inconsistent with the typology of early Maya pottery or stone tools. Some ceramics bore geometric patterns that were unfamiliar, shapes spiraling inward like vortices, abstract forms suggesting movement or transition, and interlocking motifs that matched no known iconographic set. These items were rare, found only in areas associated with the earliest layers of construction, and they vanished entirely from later contexts, mirroring the disappearance of the lineage itself. The artifacts hinted at an aesthetic tradition carried by the group, a visual language that faded as Maya artistic styles matured, leaving behind only faint echoes. One of the most arresting discoveries came from a small chamber unearthed beneath a collapsed platform. Inside were thin, rectangular stone slabs covered in carvings so fine they required magnification to fully discern. These carvings depicted a sequence of scenes portraying individuals with elongated head shapes, a feature achieved through intentional cranial modification, but executed far more extremely than typical Maya practices. The figures were shown performing rituals in isolation from the surrounding population. Their surroundings in the carvings included symbols representing water crossings, flowing currents, and what appeared to be boats or rafts constructed of a design unknown in Mesoamerica. Such imagery fueled speculation that the lineage might have arrived via waterways, possibly navigating long distances along coastal routes that had left little archaeological trace. Language specialists were intrigued by an inscription along the edge of one slab that bore signs of an early proto-writing system distinct from standardized Maya glyphs. Though impossible to fully translate, the inscription structure suggested a conceptual system emphasizing cycles of displacement and return, themes that later appeared in Maya mythology but in more metaphorical forms. The language might have been a vestige of the lineage's own communication system, absorbed partially into Maya scripts before fading as the dominant writing tradition solidified. Meanwhile, genetic analysis expanded beyond individuals associated with ceremonial burials. Samples taken from peripheral settlements and agricultural communities revealed no traces of the mysterious lineage. This absence confirmed that the group existed only within elite or ritual strata, never permeating the broader society and never becoming part of widespread demographic patterns. But this did not diminish their influence. Instead, it emphasized how selective and controlled their integration had been. They were not conquerors, nor were they a dominant population. They were specialists embedded within a society undergoing monumental transformation. As research deepened, scientists turned their attention to isotopic analysis to reconstruct the diets and migration patterns of the lineage. Surprisingly, isotopic signatures indicated that individuals from this group consumed food sources not typical of local Maya populations. Their diet included significant amounts of marine protein, along with plant species more common to coastal or riverine environments far from the inland ceremonial centers where they were buried. This supported the theory that the lineage originated elsewhere and retained elements of their ancestral subsistence patterns even after settling in the rainforest interior. The persistence of these dietary habits suggested a cultural continuity that endured for generations before finally dissolving. The marine isotopes revived one of the more provocative theories circulating among the team, that the lineage might have been remnants of a maritime society that collapsed elsewhere, forcing survivors inland. Evidence from global paleoclimatic records pointed to periods of dramatic coastal flooding and upheaval during the relevant timeline. Such events could have displaced communities living along vulnerable shorelines, pushing them into unfamiliar environments where their knowledge systems became invaluable for adaptation. If this were true, the Maya heartland might have been a refuge rather than an origin point for this group. Their sudden disappearance from the genetic record could also reflect the dwindling of a small migrant population unable to sustain itself demographically while adapting to new cultural realities. The possibility of a maritime origin gained further traction when a cache of artifacts carved from non-local shells and coral was discovered in a subterranean alcove. The presence of these materials in a region far from the sea indicated long-distance transport, either through trade networks or by the lineage itself. What distinguished these items, however, was the craftsmanship. Tiny perforations along their surfaces suggested symbolic meanings, while the arrangements in which they were found indicated ritual significance. The alcove had been sealed with extraordinary care, perhaps as part of a ceremony marking the end of the lineage's prominence or the preservation of their memory. Whatever its purpose, the cache provided a tangible link to a coastal identity embedded deep within a civilization known primarily for its inland achievements. While archaeologists worked to uncover more physical clues, cultural anthropologists turned their attention to Maya mythology. They re-examined texts and oral traditions passed down through centuries, looking for patterns that might reflect the integration of an outsider lineage. One recurring theme caught their attention: stories of ancestors emerging from a watery abyss or traveling across primordial seas guided by divine knowledge. These tales, long assumed to be symbolic, took on new resonance under the light of the genetic findings. Myth often contained echoes of historical memory, distilled through generations. It was plausible that the stories preserved the memory of a group whose journey across water brought transformative ideas to early Maya communities. Anthropologists also found significance in depictions of dual identities within Maya cosmology. Many deities possessed dual aspects: human and divine, terrestrial and celestial, local and foreign. This duality might reflect the merging of two cultural traditions: an indigenous population deeply rooted in the region and an incoming lineage carrying a distinct worldview. The interplay between these identities shaped foundational concepts of kingship, where rulers served as mediators between worlds. If the lineage contributed ritual knowledge or cosmological frameworks, their ideas may have been encoded in the symbolic duality of Maya religious thought. As the investigation expanded, the team confronted a crucial question. If the lineage played such a profound role in shaping the civilization, why was its biological signature so thoroughly erased? Disease was one possible answer. Small populations were vulnerable to epidemics, especially when encountering pathogens endemic to new land environments. Another hypothesis involved deliberate cultural assimilation. Over time, as the Maya identity solidified, the lineage's distinctiveness may have been absorbed symbolically rather than genetically. Their descendants could have relinquished exclusive practices, merged socially, and adopted local marriage patterns, eventually blending into the broader population until their genetic markers faded beyond detection. However, the most unsettling possibility involved social tension. If the lineage wielded immense ritual or intellectual authority, their presence might have sparked conflicts as emerging Maya elites sought autonomy. Historical parallels existed across the world where priestly classes or outsider groups were marginalized as political landscapes shifted. The abrupt disappearance of the lineage could reflect a socio-political transformation, perhaps even a struggle between competing visions of power. The suppression or withdrawal of the lineage might have been a turning point that shaped the trajectory of Maya civilization, marking the end of a foundational era. This line of thought directed attention to architectural layers reflecting periods of iconoclastic change. Researchers noted that some structures associated with early ceremonial practices had been deliberately buried or dismantled. Certain alignments shifted over time, and early symbols became replaced by standardized Maya motifs. These transitions could represent ideological shifts, moments when one worldview supplanted another. Whether this was peaceful, gradual, or traumatic remained unknown, but the archaeological record showed signs of a purposeful reorientation of cultural identity. The scientists recognized that understanding the lineage required stepping beyond disciplinary boundaries. Genetic data alone provided fragments, archaeology provided context, cultural anthropology offered interpretive frameworks, but none could reconstruct the full narrative. The lineage's story lay at the intersection of biology, memory, myth, and material culture. Its reconstruction required imagining how real people once navigated a world of upheaval, migration, and adaptation. These individuals were not abstract ancestors, they were survivors, innovators, and carriers of traditions that would merge with local lifeways to create something entirely new. As fieldwork intensified, the researchers uncovered evidence of early astronomical observatories aligned with precision to lunar cycles and planetary movements. These structures predated the standardized Maya calendar, suggesting the lineage may have contributed a sophisticated system of sky observation. The accuracy of these alignments hinted at a long tradition of celestial knowledge, possibly originating in a homeland where navigation depended on tracking stars across open waters. If so, the lineage's contributions to Maya astronomy were not merely symbolic, but rooted in practical skills that had ensured survival in a maritime environment. Their knowledge of celestial movement might have become the backbone of early Maya ritual calendars, agricultural cycles, and political authority. The interplay between celestial and earthly knowledge became a defining feature of Maya civilization, and the lineage's influence would have shaped how early Maya communities perceived their place within the cosmos. This shift in worldview may have provided the conceptual scaffolding for hierarchies, ceremonies, and architectural projects that define the classic period centuries later. In this sense, the lineage's impact extended far beyond their genetic presence. They shaped the intellectual DNA of the civilization, embedding ideas that persisted long after their physical traces vanished. As researchers reflected on the broader implications, they realized the discovery challenged assumptions about how civilizations form. It suggested that cultural origins were often layered rather than linear, shaped by encounters, migrations, and forgotten exchanges. The Maya example became a case study in the hidden complexities behind human achievement. It reminded scholars that great civilizations were not isolated miracles, but intricate tapestries woven from diverse experiences. Some recorded, others erased, and still others revealed only through the silent testimony of ancient bones. In the coming months, the team planned new excavations aimed at finding additional samples from the earliest settlement layers. Their hope was to uncover more pieces of the lineage's story, fragments that might reveal their size, social structure, and the timeline of their integration. Each discovery had the potential to reshape understanding of the Maya world, deepening the narrative and illuminating what had been invisible for millennia. But even if no further remains were found, the implications of the existing evidence were profound enough to transform the field. The ancient lineage remained a puzzle, but it was no longer a silent one. Its voice echoed through the artifacts, architecture, isotopes, stars, and stories that shaped Maya civilization. Its mysteries beckoned researchers deeper into the rainforest and deeper into the past, urging them to reconstruct a saga of migration, survival, and transformation. And though the lineage had vanished biologically, its presence lingered in every stone temple aligned with the heavens, in every glyph inscribed with cosmic cycles, and in every myth recalling ancestors who crossed water to bring knowledge to a people destined for greatness. The discovery had revealed a truth more intricate than anyone anticipated. Civilizations are not born from simplicity, but from convergence. And in the dense heart of the rainforest, the Maya emerged not from one lineage, but from the meeting of worlds. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on Maya DNA? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.